Linda Christian is still a pretty name, and Linda herself, as I see from the papers, is today even lovelier than ever, and certainly she has a wonderful mind. Every so often, as the years have gone by, I've seen Linda. I saw her abroad with her late husband, Tyrone Power, who had amazed me by marrying her. He was a very soft, nice kind of man. Often, when Ty was about, she looked at me with those big oblique eyes of hers, smiling inwardly, I'm sure, for Ty never knew the origin of our own friendship. I would look at her and murmur, "Smile, honey. I just want to see those choppers." They took their first bite out of me. She pretended not to hear. Lily was right. On May 10th, 1941, my son Sean was born. As it happens, Sean and I were destined to become close pals, and he is now a big fellow about 6 feet 3 inches tall, who, they say, looks like me, but better. Out of this impossible snarl of two volatile people, there came something good, anyway. Lily and I made a few public appearances during her pregnancy, even a few more after the birth of Sean. Cameras clicked. Columnists talked. The intrepid Australian had now entered the sacred precincts of parenthood. Except that Lily's game was something other. She brought up her heavy artillery, her lawyers in Los Angeles. She dug in, tougher than the French did at the Maginot Line. She dug in, tougher than the French did at the Maginot Line. She never had it so good with Sam Goldwyn. Her real character had begun when she took up with me. Now she was a one-woman army dedicated to taking away my earnings as fast as they came in. And, like General Patton, I had outrun my supplies, moving too fast. First, she sued for divorce. She had a child in her arms now, and apparently the courts figured, it's only Flynn, she might as well have his money as anyone else. I loved the idea of having a son. I liked the idea of having children. By accident, I fell into the experience of parenthood. Unless the same accident happened to me elsewhere without my ever having heard of it, and I was all for it. Let her have the money. I wanted my chance and my time with the boy as soon as he could toddle, which was fast. I didn't want her around Mulholland House, but Sean could have the place if he wanted it. When God decided on a policy of bewildering the human race, he created lawyers to screw up the works. Any church can have that quotation free without requesting permission for its use from my publishers. I just want a copyright on the observation. As possibly the most litigated against man in modern times, I feel I have the right to speak definitely about lawyers. Always a defendant, rarely a plaintiff. California lawyers skinned me properly with the most brutal property settlement ever made, and may do it again, who knows? Lily was to receive alimony from me until she married. Naturally, with this gimmick, why should she remarry, when, by law, she hooked a permanent meal ticket and a large income? Lily never has remarried. Instead, she has stayed quietly in the backdrops of my life, living off the sweat of my brow. She couldn't have afforded to marry, and not even the Vanderbilts and the Astors could pay what this settlement called for. To this day, even if I worked all my life exclusively for her, I could never meet the tax on the tax on the tax. I had a lot of cowboys around because they worked in pictures with me. They were amusing and good pals. There was one skinny old-timer who had the longest mustache in the West, so he claimed, and I never met anyone who could or would dispute it. He wore a sad look, and he loved to bet at my cockfights. He claimed to know the best birds, but he always lost. His wife tired of him and his long mustache, and she divorced him on grounds of mental cruelty, as he pronounced it. He couldn't understand being told he was cruel. He told the judge, "Judge, she can whip you and your goddamn lawyers here in court. What's cruelty?" One night, when he was drunk, we cut off half his mustache. He woke up and went around with 2 guns to find out who did it. I wore a bemused look. Buster Wiles, a bald-headed stuntman, could jump 200 feet into a little pool and come out with as much hair on his head as he went in with. Jimmy Dolgan, a long, lanky Jewish lad, still works as a stuntman for me to this day. And another, Don Turner. I could rely on these guys. They knew they could rely on me too. If they got fired one day, they'd be rehired the next. Their salary was good. They were tough, like the men I knew in New Guinea. Sometimes they were sore at me because I wanted to do the stunts in my pictures myself, grumbling it cut out their work. I yielded. I wanted the excitement of doing these things until the studio got after me. Insurance companies wouldn't insure a picture if I did the rough stuff. Take when you have to make a parachute jump out of a plane. Always a tense shot in the picture. You fall out of camera focus onto a mattress 10 or 12 feet below and hope you won't break your back. You may do the jump, or a stand-in may get the work. Experts in special effects. I like to have them about. How did they get away? How did they get that way? I was curious for their stories. Like in a hook shop, when you so often asked a whore the story of her life and she told you. I found Hollywood to be a circus land of experts at this and that. There are people who are specialists with the whip, who can flick a fly or a cigarette out of your mouth, if the camera is properly placed. I suppose a man throws a knife at you. This knife is carefully wired so as to take a certain path. You don't want somebody throwing a knife at you and just missing you at a hair's breadth. And on the screen, this wire has been painted silver so that you can't see it. There are specialists in every form of danger, like Howard Hill with the bow and arrow, a man who can put out the flame of a candle with his arrow at 30 or 40 feet. You can usually trust a good stuntman if you know him, but this doesn't always hold. I ran into trouble, but delightful trouble, while making a favorite picture, Gentleman Jim. The idea was for me, in the role of the cocky young unknown Jim Corbett, to have 6 fights on my way to the championship. This was a picture I made with Raoul Walsh while Jack Warner was away. Alexa Smith was the girl lead. We decided to take advantage of Jack's absence by tossing into the story a lot of whimsy that he might not have allowed. Cracks like when Jim is reading his fan mail and comes upon a letter from George Bernard Shaw, whom he has never heard of. "Hey, bub, read this. This here one is good. Some bum signs himself George Bernard Shaw. Says he's written a play about a boxer. Wants me to play it." That line in print mightn't mean much, but on the screen, limning a simple Irish fellow on this way could have been a laugh, especially from Shaw fans. My opponents in the fight game were 6 well-known wrestlers who later appeared on television. Independent of what they did with me in the ring, I had fun on the set bumping their heads together. I would say to Tiny Tim, who was 6 feet 6 inches tall, "This guy says you're yellow." He would go over to Lord Fauntleroy, a man whose shoulders were about 4 feet across, sock him in the back of the neck and drop him. I'd say to Strangler Lewis, "Tiny Tim says you weren't never no champ." Strangler would swing his sledgehammer fist down on Tiny Tim. Each time these chaps hit the floor, they got up, looked around, found out who dropped them, then went over and clouted the other, as we had the camera going. There was Abdul the Turk, who made his name riding down Hollywood Boulevard on a camel. I could egg him on to take a clout at his lordship, who had a shock of glowing hair atop his enormous body. I howled as the behemoths popped each other around the set. I reached the stage in the film where I waged this championship fight with an excellent and tough fighter, Jack Loper, able enough in the ring to be knocked out by Joe Louis. I suggested a routine to him that would look good on film. He was to throw 3 punches at me. "Let's get it straight. I'll go down," I said. "Then get up and you throw again. Then I'll step to the left. By this time, I will be in the lights." This meant the shot would be complete, with the exchange of blows looking very effective. Instead, in the first poke he took, he landed on my chin, changed the shot entirely, and jarred the liver out of me. I swung an unrehearsed punch back at him. He shot a terrific one to my chin, and I was out for 2 hours. Waking up in the first aid room, I had a talk with Loper. He was remorseful, said it was an accident. Very well, I said. We'd try again. Once more I explained how the blows should land. Camera, action. On the first punch, he lifted me right off the floor, and down I went, and again I was hauled off to the first aid room. The production manager said, "I think we have had a pretty hard day, haven't we? You must be mad as hell at Loper." "No, but I would like to have a little chat with him." Loper came to my side. Tears streamed down his face. "Buddy," I began, "did somebody put you up to this? Somebody around here that doesn't like me?" He blubbered with apology. He wept. I was the last one in the world he wanted to hurt. "I tell you what I'm going to do," I proposed. "You know those 4 corner posts?" He asked where, what posts? "The posts of the ring," I said. "Yeah. I'm going to do one more shot with you. If you miss this time, I can honestly promise you that that bottle down there," I pointed to a champagne bottle, "will break your skull, and you'll never see again. This is my personal guarantee." I told him that when I called out duck, he must punch over my head. We were both unnerved. I poured champagne, and we drank to the next take. I warned him once more as we entered the ring. There were only 4 punches he had to remember. If you can't remember them without pushing me into those lights or without knocking me cold, I'm going to retaliate. I had to clear up what the word retaliate meant. His eyes opened wide at my translation. "It means I'll break your fucking head in." By now, nice old Jack was petrified. He covered when I hit. He shuffled away from me. Finally, to make him come out fighting, I did an unforgivable thing. I hit him right in the nuts. That revived his fighting spirit. He came out. He landed a tremendous one on my jaw, and I went down for the 3rd time. Out! 3 times in one day. I was fed up, a badly beaten actor. I took 3 days off. For once, I loved making a picture. Putting me in cowboy pictures seemed to me the most ridiculous miscasting, but it was successful for Warner's. Often in these pictures, I had to alibi my accent, which was still a bit too English for the American ear. I always had to get in a couple of lines which went like this. Heavy. "Where are you from, pardner?" "Flynn. I happen to come from Ireland, but I am as American as you are." That got to be a trademark in my American films. There's a difference between the average Western and a big spectacular. A Western was generally batted off very quickly, at a certain price, and, for example, no matter what Randolph Scott said or did, the picture sold, like Johnny Wayne's do. The big spectaculars, Dodge City, Virginia City, Silver City, were made with an enormous budget and created in a very different manner. The studio spared no expense because they paid off in a big way. Jack Warner knew what the public wanted and gave it better than anyone else. I felt I was miscast in Westerns, but this was impossible to point out to producers when the pictures were so highly successful. It was most frustrating. It stopped my trying to act. I walked through my roles, jumped on that old horse, swung my legs over that old corral fence. My heart wasn't in it, only my limbs. What was the use? I felt. I couldn't get out of my contract, and I couldn't get Warner's to see me in other acting roles. While I couldn't understand the public buying me particularly, I could understand the Western, the frontier story, as a classic form of national entertainment. It is part of America's heritage, our history. Everybody knows what a Western is about. The title would be enough to tell you. Expressive, simple, native, like Stagecoach. I'm not denying that the Westerns are wonderful entertainment. I love to look at them as well as anyone. I just wanted to act, to have a chance to play a character, to say goodbye to the swashbuckler roles, to get swords and horses to hell out of my life. I itched to turn in a prize-winning job, but they held to make money. Box office. Box office. The ruin of creative personalities. The Nazis invaded the Low Countries. Pearl Harbor was bombed. Hollywood began to make more anti-Nazi and pro-Allies pictures. I was in several of these vehicles. Dive Bomber, Objective Burma, Edge of Darkness. One of the few pictures of which I'm proud is Objective Burma. Jack Warner wasn't around the studio at the time, so Raoul Walsh and I made the picture, but it was Jerry Wald's baby. I was not the producer, but I had my way with many of the creative aspects. Sometimes, make-believe is not so far from reality as you might suppose. Sometimes make-believe is reality and presents reality better than life itself. Often pictures seem more real than the things they're supposed to portray. We simulated the conditions of the Burma campaign. We had a technical advisor who had actually been all through the whole British retreat. He was a Britisher, a Major Watkins. He had been gravely wounded there, and Jerry Wald, with his flair for bringing people together, dug him up for counseling on this film. That picture so delineated the conditions of Burma that even people who had been in the Burma campaign came out of the theater asking, what part of Burma was that? They were dubious, disbelieving, when they were told that that was Santa Anita Ranch in California, the ranch of Lucky Baldwin. We built sets there so lifelike that even the experts couldn't tell them from the originals. Warner Brothers took a lot of trouble over location, under very trying circumstances, to make it rough, rugged, tough. A contribution I made to that particular picture was to introduce the technique of silence. The silence held the suspense. I know it kept the audience on the edge of their seats. A musical score would have ruined it. The film got a different reception in England. In that country, which gave me my accent and my histrionic training, and was my motherland until the time I took out American citizenship, you would have thought I was the representative of the State Department in Washington, telling the British that not only were Americans winning World War II, but that I, Flynn, was doing it single-handed. The Lord Chamberlain yanked the picture after the first showing, for the English press flipped with rage. Even so, a large crowd was out there in Leicester Square to see the picture the following night. Almost an international incident had begun. In a cartoon of one of the biggest newspapers in England, I was depicted standing triumphantly with the American flag, my right foot on the grave of a British soldier. Actually, Objective Burma ended with a shot showing a horde of American planes flying triumphantly over Burma. That might have been good for American morale at the time, but it sure made the English feel bad. Even the late King George VI asked me, later, at a command performance, in a puzzled way, "Mr. Flynn, what is this talk that always makes people laugh about you when they mention Burma?" I hardly knew what to say. All I could think of was, "Sir, apparently the picture proved conclusively that I took Burma single-handed, and it was a pushover, sir." He laughed, but looked more puzzled than ever. What I should have said was that the Americans didn't mean to imply that they had won Burma. It was unfortunate that the picture came out when the British were still licking their wounds after a disastrous retreat, and my heroics in that picture, together with the unsubtle point that the Americans were arriving in time to save all, touched a lot of English people on the raw. But why blame the actor? He does not decide to make a picture. He does not produce the picture or write the screenplay. He's only expected to be entertaining. Ever since then, I've been the butt, often to my amusement, of cartoonists. They usually gag at something like this. The cartoon shows trouble, for example, in Lebanon. The real war is on, and there is a peasant standing nearby who doesn't grasp that it is a real war. He's been to movies aplenty, and he quips, "Must be a movie company on the location here. Wonder when Errol will arrive." My dog Arno given to me by Robert Lord, a producer, became very famous about Hollywood. Everybody knew the dog. He went with me to the studio, on my yacht, even to nightclubs once or twice. Arno got lost at sea during one of my Sirocco trips. I felt pretty bad. I got a call from the Coast Guard saying Arno was identified by his collar. They asked me if I wanted to claim the dog's body. I said no, just send me the collar. I buried the collar in the animal cemetery I had in the rear of the Mulholland house. The movie columnist Jim Fiddler printed an item saying, in effect, Errol Flynn, whose love for his dog Arno has been much heralded, didn't even bother to get his body when it was washed up on shore. That's how much he cared for him. Just that, but it was enough. Each man mourns in his own way, and no one can tell another's feelings. A little later, I went with Bruce Cabot to the Morambo. As we arrived, Cabot remarked, "Hey, there's your pal, Fiddler." At that moment, I mourned Arno's afresh. I walked over to Fiddler's table. He saw me coming through the dancers and got up with a smile, ready to extend his hand. I said, "I won't dignify you with a closed fist, but..." And I gave him an open-handed wallop hard. He went over the dance floor. At that instant, I felt a sharp pain in my ear. His wife had picked up the nearest fork and jabbed me with it. Jimmy brought me into court on a charge of assault. I tried to lighten the proceedings with a crack. The lady obviously had good table manners. She used the right fork. Jack Warner was upset because it became a national scandal. You're not supposed to bop the press. Today, Fiddler and I are excellent friends.